Welcome to our very first deep dive. This is a brand new show we're calling The End of the World, and we're jumping straight into the deep end today.
We really are, and we're glad you're here listening.
Yeah, the goal of this show, our entire mission, is to break down global conflicts for you using strict strategic analysis. We're talking game theory and strictly verified sources.
Right, we want to cut through the noise.
Exactly. We aren't looking at daily headlines or political spin. We want to explain what is really happening on the ground.
But before we get into the specifics of the data, we do need to establish some ground rules for you, just to be absolutely clear.
Yeah, please.
We are not taking sides in this conflict. We are presenting strategic analysis drawn from academic sources, from verified international reporting and established frameworks.
Right.
We are not a political channel. We're not a propaganda outlet. We are here to analyze, not to advocate.
That is a crucial distinction. And the core framework of today's deep dive relies heavily on an incredible breakdown by Professor Jiang.
Right, the game theory expert.
Yeah, he uses the exact same strategic frameworks that military planners actually use behind closed doors. And we need to get straight into it because the baseline is, well, it's terrifying.
It is.
According to the strategic assessments we have, World War III has essentially started.
Yeah.
The United States and Israel have attacked Iran, and we are now in the 5th day of this war.
And to really understand where we are on day 5, you have to apply a historical framework that analysts call the empire pattern.
The empire pattern. Let's unpack that for everyone.
So if you look at the Romans, the Persians, the British, the Ottomans, every great empire falls. That's a historical given.
Right.
But the critical insight from game theory is when they fall. They almost never collapse when they are weak or defensive. They fall at the exact moment they feel the most invincible.
Wow. When they're overconfident.
Exactly. When leadership is so confident in their tech or their military that they believe they can project power anywhere without facing any real consequence.
So the thesis we're posing to you today is that this current war might be that exact mistake for America.
It's highly probable.
Because the mainstream news is completely missing the real story here. The United States may be on the losing side of the biggest strategic blunder in modern history.
And to understand why we have to look at the immediate fallout, we have to look at Dubai.
Right, because based on the data we are seeing, Dubai is finished as a long-term global financial hub.
It's a massive shift. I mean, picture Dubai before this week.
One of the wealthiest, safest cities on Earth.
Right. A global hub housing the busiest international airport. But then the strikes happened. In the first 24 hours, Iran attacked Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Doha, Bahrain, and Kuwait.
The verified data on this is wild. Just for the UAE alone, Iran launched 189 ballistic missiles, 941 drones, and 3 cruise missiles.
That is a massive saturation strike.
And the physical damage is real.
Yeah.
Dubai's main terminal at the international airport was visibly damaged.
And the panic that follows that kind of infrastructure hit is instantaneous. Over 21,300 flights were canceled across 7 major airports.
21,300 flights.
Yes. And picture this visceral scene. Wealthy expats were paying $250,000 just to secure a single seat on a private flight out.
$250,000 to flee.
Exactly. Because the demographic reality is fragile, 90% of Dubai's population are expats.
Right, they aren't citizens.
No, they have no generational ties. They won't stay and fight. They will flee to Singapore or Hong Kong or Tokyo. Decades of reputation built on absolute safety just evaporated in a weekend.
But it raises an obvious question for you listening. Why would Iran attack neutral Gulf states?
Because strategically, they aren't neutral.
Right.
They house the American military. They open their airspace for American and Israeli strikes. In game theory, if you host the enemy, you become the enemy base.
Which brings up a terrifying geographical reality. These Gulf states import 80% of their food.
And they have virtually no natural water.
Let's talk about the math on that because it's staggering. Dubai uses 17,000% more water than it naturally has.
Right. Bahrain is at nearly 4,000%. Saudi Arabia at 883%.
So they rely entirely on desalination plants.
Yes. These massive factories right on the coast, turning seawater into drinking water. They provide 60% of the region's supply.
But they are massive stationary targets. Right?
Completely exposed. And if enough of them go down to a swarm of cheap $50,000 drones, millions of people instantly have no water.
That is an immediate humanitarian catastrophe.
Measured in days.
Which brings us to arguably the most important number in this entire war. The cost gap.
Economic asymmetry.
Right. The $50,000 drone versus the $1 million missile. Let's break down Iran's offensive capability.
So Iran has focused on the Shahed drones. They cost roughly $35,000 to $50,000 each.
Which is nothing for a military budget.
Exactly. And they produce 500 of them a day. They have a stockpile of around 80,000.
Wow.
And they are highly mobile. They launch them from the back of commercial trucks anywhere in the mountains.
And you contrast that with the American defense systems. Let's look at the TA system, the high-altitude missile defense.
Each one of those interceptors costs $1 million.
$1 million to shoot down a $50,000 drone.
And they frequently miss. So standard procedure is firing 2 to 3 interceptors at a single drone.
So you are spending $2 to $3 million to stop $50,000.
You're spending 20 to 60 times more on defense than the enemy spends on attack. That guarantees a nation goes bankrupt fighting regardless of how strong their military is.
And we're already seeing those economic shockwaves verified right now. Look at the shipping industry.
The supertanker freight rates.
Right. The cost to ship oil by sea hit an all-time record of over $423,000 per day. That was a 94% increase in a single day.
Because oil insurers are completely pulling out of the Middle East. They are refusing to cover the war risk.
The economic bleeding has absolutely begun. And to understand why it's so hard to stop, you have to look at the map.
Geography decides everything in this war.
I want you to forget the politics and the weapons for a second and just visualize the map of this region.
Let's start with Iran. Iran is basically a mountain fortress. The Zagros Mountains are rugged, brutal terrain.
Right.
Their rocket bases and drone launchers are buried deep in limestone caves. They are invisible to satellites and completely unreachable by ground forces.
It's geography that has protected them for millennia.
Exactly. And then look at the other side. The Gulf states.
It's entirely flat, open desert.
Zero natural cover. Their oil fields, their bases, those desalination plants we talked about, they are completely exposed.
But the real choke point, the most vital geographic feature, is the water between them, the Strait of Hormuz.
It is only 33 kilometers wide.
33 kilometers. A strong endurance athlete could swim that distance.
And its global importance is unmatched. 20% of the entire world's oil passes through that tiny gap.
And the dependencies for specific nations are terrifying. India gets 60% of its oil there. China gets 40%. Japan gets 75%.
And the Japanese prime minister actually issued a public warning about this. He stated that if the strait closes, Japan runs out of oil in 8 to 9 months.
Which means total economic collapse for a G7 nation. And the current reality on day 5, Iran has closed the strait.
Traffic dropped 70% instantly, and right now it's essentially at zero.
Brent crude is up roughly 10% already. Analysts from Barclays and Bank of America are forecasting it blowing past $100 a barrel.
Now, President Trump did announce U.S. Navy escorts for tankers.
Right.
And a U.S. submarine did sink an Iranian warship in the Indian Ocean.
But did any of that actually work?
No. Those tactical moves completely failed to change the reality on the water. Commercial shipping companies still won't risk it.
And politically, the U.S. Senate failed to curb Trump's war powers, which just adds to the momentum of the escalation.
Which means we need to shift our perspective here. This war isn't actually about missiles.
Right. It's about money.
Right.
It is about breaking what we call the empire's engine.
Let's walk through that loop step by step for the listener because it's brilliant and terrifying. Step 1, Gulf states sell oil in U.S. dollars.
The petrodollar.
Exactly. Step 2, they take those billions of dollars and invest them right back into the U.S. stock market.
They're buying up the heavy hitters. NVIDIA, Microsoft, Google, Apple.
Right. Step 3, that massive influx of money funds the U.S. economy.
Which leads to step 4. A booming economy funds a $1 trillion U.S. military.
And step 5, that military protects the Gulf states so they can keep pumping and selling the oil. The engine just loops.
But what happens when the Strait of Hormuz is closed?
The whole cascade falls apart. The Gulf states can't physically sell the oil, so the dollars stop flowing.
Right.
Which means their investments in U.S. markets dry up. The U.S. economy weakens, which cripples their ability to endlessly fund the war.
So Iran doesn't even need to defeat the U.S. military.
Not at all. They just have to keep the strait closed and wait for the economic damage in the West to become self-sustaining.
Because an empire isn't really just an army. It's an aura.
It's an image.
Right. It's this illusion that makes nations trade in your currency and host your bases out of fear and respect.
And look at the cracks in that illusion right now. The U.S. Fifth Fleet headquarters in Bahrain was struck.
Dubai's airport is paralyzed.
Trillion-dollar missile systems are failing against cheap fiberglass drones. Once that illusion of invincibility cracks, the emperor has no clothes. Empires fall from within.
But to understand why Iran is willing to risk everything to do this, we have to address a massive cultural blind spot in the West.
The religious aspect.
Yes. To Iran, this is not just a border dispute. This is a religious war. It's a jihad.
You have to understand the history. Iran is a Shia Muslim nation. The Shia are a 10% minority in global Islam.
Right.
And for 1,400 years, they have been the persecuted underdogs. Their entire core cultural identity is rooted in martyrdom, in sacrificing yourself for the faith against a superior enemy.
Which brings us to the decapitation strike, the opening move by the U.S. and Israel.
Right.
They specifically targeted Ayatollah Khamenei, who was 86 years old. He had prostate cancer.
Absolutely could have fled.
He could have gone to Moscow, but he stayed in Tehran, and he died with his family. And over 1,000 people were killed in Iran from those initial strikes.
And this is where the perspectives completely diverge. The West saw that strike as a devastating, crippling blow. Sever the head of the snake.
But how did state media and the Iranian people see it?
They saw it as the greatest act of martyrdom in modern Shia history.
Wow.
It didn't break them. It forged this massive unifying force. It created a religious obligation for revenge among Shia Muslims globally.
And strategically, Iran completely anticipated this.
They decentralized their command immediately. Every region operates independently now.
Which leads to the cruelest irony of this bombing campaign. Think about who was actually dying in these strikes.
The urbanites in Tehran, in Isfahan, and Shiraz.
The educated progressive people who might have actually supported American regime change in a different context. They're the ones dying in the airstrikes.
Meanwhile, the religious hardliners, the ones who welcome martyrdom, they are completely untouched. They're sitting safe in those deep mountain bunkers.
It's the tragic repeating pattern of Iraq and Afghanistan. America is so good at winning the opening battle through superior firepower.
But that exact overconfidence leads to losing the subsequent asymmetric war every time.
So what are the endgames here? Both sides have a terrifying strategy. Let's start with the American and Israeli plan.
The unannounced plan is essentially destroying Iran as a coherent nation.
Right.
Because Iran is ethnically diverse. You have Persians in the center, but on the borders, you have Kurds, Azeris, Balokis, Arabs.
So the strategy is to fracture the country along those ethnic lines.
Exactly. By destroying the water infrastructure and arming those minorities, you trap them in endless internal resource wars. It keeps Iran permanently weak.
It's morally fraught, to say the least, but Iran's counter-strategy is just as ambitious.
They call it Pax Islamica.
Right.
Look at the map of the Muslim world.
Yeah.
2 billion people. And they are largely ruled by very unpopular dictatorships backed by the U.S. like Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Algeria.
So Iran's goal is to rally those populations directly.
To overthrow their rulers and unite under Iranian leadership.
And it is already happening. We've seen Shia populations storm the U.S. embassy in Pakistan.
Yeah.
Embassies in Iraq were attacked.
And the real powder keg is Bahrain.
Right, because Bahrain has a Shia majority, but they are ruled by Sunnis.
And they host the U.S. Fifth Fleet. They are absolutely ready to become the first domino to fall.
And we have to zoom out even further, because this is deeply tied to the war in Ukraine.
Everything is connected. Europe is entirely cut off from Russian energy right now. They depend wholly on the Gulf to survive.
If the Gulf collapses, Europe goes bankrupt.
And if Germany, France, or Britain decide they have to enter this conflict militarily to save their own economies, to force the strait open...
Then Russia and China might enter on Iran's side.
And that is a full-blown world war.
Which brings up the ultimate grim question, the nuclear question.
If a nation is actively losing an existential war, do they use nuclear weapons? That question is officially on the table right now.
It is the unthinkable scenario, but it's real. Which is why this could be the beginning of the end. Let's summarize how this is unraveling.
The geography favors the mountain fortress.
The cost asymmetry bankrupts the American defense.
The economic cycle is completely severed by a 33-kilometer choke point.
And the religious motivation turned a decapitation strike into an unstoppable unifying force.
Because the American military-industrial complex was built for the Cold War.
Right. It was designed to spend immense amounts of money to intimidate traditional states.
It was not designed to fight poor, determined, religiously motivated enemies wielding cheap drones from caves.
So this specific war might not be the exact moment America ends, But it is very likely the war that starts the ending.
The world after this conflict will not look anything like the world before it.
Well, that's our first deep dive for the end of the world. We have really only scratched the surface today. There's so much more to unpack.
It really is. And if you found this valuable, if this gave you a perspective you're just not getting from mainstream news, we need your support.
We do.
This show is entirely independent. We have no sponsors, no corporate backing, no agenda. We dig through academic analysis, verified reporting, and game theory frameworks to give you a picture you won't find anywhere else.
So if you want to help us keep producing deep dives like this, and if you want access to exclusive regional breakdowns, detailed area-by-area analysis of what's happening on the ground, head to buymeacoffee.com and embed to the world. Every single contribution helps us keep going.
And we have a lot more coming. This is going to be a series. We're going much deeper into game theory,
Right.
the actual strategic frameworks military planners use. We'll explore how history repeats itself and how patterns from past empires leave clues about what happens next. If you thought today was eye-opening, you haven't seen anything yet.
But before you go, I want you to consider this final thought. You might think a war in the mountains of Iran or the deserts of the Gulf is a world away. It doesn't affect you. But look at the petrodollar, Luke, we discussed today. Your personal savings, your 401k, the tech stocks anchoring your retirement, they are completely invisibly dependent on the free flow of oil through a 33-kilometer strip of water that is currently closed.
It's all connected.
The front lines of this war aren't just in the Middle East. They're quietly sitting inside your own bank account, just waiting for the illusion to shatter. Think about that.
Subscribe, share this deep dive with someone who needs to hear it, and support us at buymeacoffee.com and Men of the World. See you in the next one.